He didn't fire me. He gave me an order, and that order was my humiliation. My name is Gabrielle, and for 10 years I was the chief financial officer of the House of Lorenzo, the most extravagant and celebrated fashion house in New York. I was the guardian of the numbers, the voice of reason in an empire built on silk, feathers, and creative impulses, while Lorenzo, our creative director, and a near deity in the fashion world, dreamed of shows in impossible settings and fabrics spun from gold. I was the woman who said no. I was the anchor that kept his balloon of genius tethered to the firm ground of financial reality, until he decided to cut the rope. The confrontation happened in the boardroom. I had just presented a report showing that the expenses for the last fashion show had exceeded the budget by 300%. The cause was clear: inflated invoices from exclusive suppliers and payments to shell consulting firms that belonged to Lorenzo's friends. It was blatant, shameless embezzlement. Lorenzo, who until then had been listening with theatrical boredom, stood up. He didn't address me, but the board, who looked at him with the adoration of a congregation seeing a god. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth but sharp, "art cannot be suffocated by calculators. Genius has a price. Miss Dubois, with all due respect, is an accountant, an excellent one, but she understands numbers, not dreams. She sees an invoice. I see a concept. She sees a cost. I see a legacy." He then turned to me, his dark eyes flashing. "Your attempt to sabotage my vision, to chain me to this fiscal mediocrity, ends today. The board has already given me carte blanche." The chairman, an elderly man blinded by the glare of Lorenzo's fame, just nodded. "From now on, Gabrielle," Lorenzo continued, savoring every word of my public humiliation, "your function changes. You will no longer question. You will execute. You will sign every payment I authorize without a single but. You will be the pen that enables my art, or the door will be open for you. And I assure you, with my influence, it will be the last door that opens for you in your career." It was a sentence. He hadn't fired me. He had turned me into his forced accomplice, a rubber stamp, a puppet to legitimize his frauds. I looked at the faces on the board, at Lorenzo's arrogance, and I felt the anger rise. But I swallowed it. I took a deep breath, and with a coldness that surprised everyone, including myself, I said, "Understood, Lorenzo. If that is the new directive, it will be done. From today, I will be the facilitator of your vision." He smiled, the smile of a predator that has just cornered its prey. He thought he had broken me, that he had tamed me, but what he didn't know was that by forcing me to be the pen, he was handing me the weapon. And I, the gray accountant, was about to start building the dossier that would lead to his ruin. My capitulation shocked everyone. The Iron Gabrielle, as they called me behind my back, had bent the knee. Lorenzo, exultant, began to test the limits of his new power, and I, with a professional smile plastered on my face, let him. He no longer saw me as a threat, but as a tool, a convenient rubber stamp to legitimize his diversions. And that's exactly what I became. "Gabrielle, darling," he would say, walking into my office without knocking, "I need a payment of 200,000 euros for the Visual Trends Consultancy in Milan. It's for the concept of our next show." I knew the consultancy was the company of a friend's girlfriend. I knew the service wasn't worth a tenth of that price. Instead of arguing, I would take the inflated invoice and say, "Of course, Lorenzo, but for our new compliance policy and to protect you from any fiscal misunderstanding, I'll need you to sign this payment order and attach a small report justifying the strategic need for this specific supplier." His arrogance was his blindness. He loved to sign. Every signature was an affirmation of his power over me, over the rules. He signed everything, laughing, thinking he was just complying with some harmless bureaucracy I had created to protect myself.
My secret weapon was being built with the ink from his own pen. I was no longer the guardian of the vault. I was the meticulous archivist of his crimes. I created a new encrypted digital filing system on my personal computer. Every payment order he signed, every contract with a shell company, every email in which he ordered an urgent and unquestionable payment was scanned, cataloged, and added to a dossier I called the Lorenzo Legacy. I documented everything. The wire transfers to offshore companies disguised as rare fabric research, the rental payments for photo shoot locations that never existed, the salaries for creative assistants, who were in fact his cousins and friends living in Europe. For 6 months, I was the perfect CFO, the facilitator, the silent accomplice. Lorenzo had never been happier. He was at the peak of his genius, free from my petty constraints. The company was bleeding money, but the shows were more spectacular than ever, and his fame as a visionary without limits grew by the day. He was building his house of cards on a swamp, and I was patiently documenting the exact location of every rotten pillar. New York Fashion Week, the biggest event on the national fashion calendar, was approaching. It would be the stage for his greatest collection, his ultimate coronation, and I knew it would also be the stage for his downfall. My dossier was almost complete. The protagonist has been subjugated, but she's silently building her revenge. If you love seeing arrogance hand a hero the weapon of their own ruin, take a moment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the outcome. With the dossier complete, hundreds of pages of irrefutable proof, all bearing Lorenzo's flamboyant signature, the next step had to be executed with surgical precision. A direct complaint from me would be easily dismissed as the revenge of a resentful employee. The source had to be anonymous, and the information undeniable. Through a series of intermediaries and cryptocurrency payments to leave no trail, I hired a former investigative journalist who now worked as a risk consultant. He was known for his discretion and his contacts within the IRS and the FBI. In a discreet coffee shop in the West Village, I handed him an encrypted flash drive. "Everything you need is on there," I said. "Tax fraud, money laundering, racketeering. It's a multi-million-dollar scheme, documented and signed by the creative director of the House of Lorenzo himself." He took the flash drive, his eyes glinting with the excitement of a hound that has caught the scent of its prey. "And what do you want in return?" "I want nothing," I replied. "I am simply a citizen concerned with business ethics. I want this to get into the right hands, and I want the operation to happen at a moment of maximum media exposure for him, so there's no way to bury the story." "New York Fashion Week," he said, a smile forming on his face. "That would be poetic." "Exactly," I agreed. While he worked his channels, I prepared my own exit. I began to quietly look for new positions, not in fashion houses, but in investment funds, in corporate governance consulting firms. I knew that when the bomb exploded, the House of Lorenzo would become a toxic place. My revenge was not about taking power there. It was about exposing the rot and walking away, leaving Lorenzo to sink with the ship he drilled holes in. Lorenzo, oblivious to everything, was at the peak of his euphoria. The show was approaching, and he was on every magazine cover. He treated me with an amused condescension, like a king treats his court jester. "See, Gabrielle," he told me one day, tossing a magazine with his face on the cover onto my desk, "this is what happens when creativity isn't limited by spreadsheets. We are flying." "Indeed, Lorenzo," I replied with my professional smile. "We are flying." I just didn't tell him I was about to clip his wings mid-flight. The atmosphere backstage at New York Fashion Week was electric chaos. Models, makeup artists, producers, all rushing around in a last-minute frenzy. At the center of it all, like a Roman emperor before the games, was Lorenzo. He was shouting orders, adjusting a detail on a dress, giving interviews to TV crews, all at the same time. He was in his element. I was there with my clipboard and my impassive CFO face, officially to approve the final emergency payments. In reality, I was the silent spectator of the final act of his farce. I was the only person in that venue who knew that this empire of glamour was about to turn to dust. My phone vibrated discreetly in my pocket. A message from my contact, the consultant. Just 3 words. Tomorrow. 9 a.m., headquarters. The warrant had been issued. The raid was scheduled. Later, amidst the chaos, a young journalist from a gossip magazine stopped me. "Gabrielle, is it true what they say, that you and Lorenzo had many conflicts, but now you're his biggest supporter?" I forced a tired smile. Lorenzo is a creative genius. My job is to ensure his vision becomes a reality, no matter the cost. The answer was perfectly ambiguous. To the journalist, it sounded like loyalty. To me, it was the purest truth. I was in fact ensuring that his vision, with all its frauds and excesses, would become a very public and very legal reality. That night, Lorenzo threw an exclusive party for the team and the press at the most expensive hotel in the city. He was exultant, toasting with champagne and receiving praise. At one point, he saw me in a corner and came over, his ego inflated by alcohol and adulation. "You know, Gabrielle," he said, his voice slurring slightly, "I have to admit, you've learned your place. You've become an excellent facilitator. Maybe there's a future for you in this new empire after all." He was offering me crumbs from his throne, believing I should be grateful. "I just do my duty, Lorenzo," I replied, with a calmness that disarmed him. "Tomorrow is your big day. Enjoy every moment." He smiled, patted my shoulder, and walked away to receive more applause. He had no way of knowing that while he was dreaming of the next day's headlines of glory, I was dreaming of the very different headlines that were already being prepared. The storm was no longer gathering. It was already upon us, just waiting for the clock to strike 9. The calm before the storm. The day of reckoning is about to arrive. Stories of patient women who build their revenge in the details are the soul of our channel. If you admire that strategy, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the final runway. The morning of the show, the air at the House of Lorenzo headquarters was electric, a mix of panic and excitement. Lorenzo, despite the party the night before, was impeccable in a silk suit, conducting the final chaos before leaving for the event venue. He was on the phone, yelling at a producer about the stage lighting. I was in my office, door open, calmly sipping my coffee and reading the financial news. At exactly 9 a.m., I saw in the reflection of my office's glass wall what I had been waiting for. 4 black, unmarked cars pulled up in front of our building. Men and women in dark suits and serious faces got into the lobby with an authority no security guard would dare question. They were agents from the IRS and the FBI. The receptionist, pale, buzzed Lorenzo's office. I heard his voice, irritated. "Not now. I'm busy. Tell them to wait." But they didn't wait. The lead agent, a middle-aged man with a no-nonsense gaze, walked into Lorenzo's office without knocking. I stood up and moved to my office doorway for a better view. "Lorenzo Viana," the agent said, his voice calm but filled with power. "Yes, that's me. And whoever you are, you're interrupting the most important day on the fashion calendar. Have the decency to." "IRS criminal investigation," the agent cut him off, flashing a warrant. "We have a court order to search and seize these premises and a warrant for your person. You are under investigation for tax fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering." Lorenzo's world stopped. The color drained from his face. His assistants froze. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the distant sounds of horns on the street. This is a mistake. It's absurd. It's a conspiracy by my competitors."
You can present your defense to the competent authorities, the agent said, impassive. Please come with us. And you, he said, turning to the other agents, begin the seizure of all computers, servers, and financial documents. As they escorted him out, walking down the main hallway, the shocked and disbelieving stares of the entire staff followed him. The moment he passed my doorway, our eyes met. In that instant, he knew. There was no doubt in his eyes. He saw my calm face, my almost imperceptible smile, and he understood everything. He understood my obedience, my collaboration, my compliance policies. He understood that every document he arrogantly signed was a brick in the wall of his own prison. He opened his mouth to say something, perhaps to accuse me, to scream, but no sound came out. The genius, the visionary, the god of fashion was led away in silence, leaving behind only chaos, a canceled fashion show, and the ruin of an empire built on lies. I went back to my desk, picked up my purse, and walked towards the exit. My work there, finally, was done. The news exploded like a fragmentation bomb in the worlds of fashion and business. Fashion genius Lorenzo Viana arrested for fraud on the morning of his show. The headlines were merciless, and the images of him being escorted out, his face pale and shocked, went viral. The show, the most anticipated event of New York Fashion Week, was obviously canceled, leaving a multi-million-dollar vacuum and a scandal that would echo for years. The dossier I had so patiently built was an unbreachable fortress. Every transaction, every inflated invoice, every payment to a shell company was meticulously documented and, most importantly, bore Lorenzo's flamboyant signature. His defense crumbled before it even began. In his depositions, he desperately tried to blame me. He painted me as the cunning mind behind it all, a vengeful CFO who tricked him into signing documents he didn't understand. But my reputation as Iron Gabrielle, the woman who had fought his excesses for years, spoke louder. The press dug up old meeting minutes, emails where I explicitly questioned costs and warned the board. I didn't have to say a word. My track record spoke for me. I wasn't the criminal, I was the witness he had tried to silence and, upon failing, tried to frame. The House of Lorenzo, the empire of silk and feathers, imploded spectacularly. With its accounts frozen and its reputation in tatters, the company filed for bankruptcy in less than a month. The board of directors, complicit in their willful blindness and dazzled admiration, was dissolved in disgrace, its members forever tainted by negligence. I resigned the day after the raid with a simple, formal letter and became invisible. I refused dozens of interviews, book deals, and documentary proposals. My revenge was never about the spotlight, but about the quiet justice of the numbers. I had spent months in the darkness, watching, cataloging, waiting. And now, with the harsh light of truth exposed, I could simply walk away and let the consequences run their natural course. Lorenzo didn't just lose his freedom in his company, he lost his legacy. He would forever be remembered not as a genius, but as a fraud. I didn't look for another job at a fashion house. The glamour of that world had faded for me, tainted by the corruption I had witnessed up close. I took 6 months off. I traveled to remote places where no one knew my name or the story. I read the books I never had time for, and for the first time in a decade, I felt at peace, the master of my own time. The offer came from an unexpected place, through a contact the consultant I hired had passed on to me, a Swiss investment fund known globally for its focus on impact investing and ethical corporate governance. They invited me to a meeting in Geneva. The fund's CEO, an elegant, discreet man, got straight to the point. "We don't invest in companies, Ms. Dubois. We invest in leadership with integrity. We read about your case, not in the headlines, but in the risk reports. What you did at the House of Lorenzo wasn't just exposing a crime. It was an act of moral courage in a sector that often lacks it.
You proved you understand that the foundation of any lasting luxury brand is not extravagance, but trust.
They didn't want a CFO to control costs. They wanted a partner. They offered me the leadership of their new, ambitious luxury goods division with the mission to find and invest in new brands that had a purpose, that were sustainable and, above all, ethically irreproachable. My job was no longer to say no to creativity, but to find and fund creativity with a conscience. Today, I travel the world not to audit expenses, but to discover talent. I support young designers who believe that beauty and ethics can and should go hand in hand. My new life is infinitely more fulfilling and more powerful than any position I've ever held. As for Lorenzo, he served a reduced sentence for cooperation, but his true sentence is obscurity. No one wears his creations anymore. His name, once whispered with reverence in the fashion world, is now synonymous with fraud and excess. My revenge wasn't the police raid or the headlines. That was just the inevitable consequence. The real revenge was my silent refusal to be an accomplice. It was my decision that my integrity was not for sale at any price. By forcing me to be the pen for his crimes, Lorenzo gave me the power to write the final chapter of his story. And I did, with the same precision and meticulousness with which I used to analyze his spreadsheets. The books, in the end, were balanced. Gabrielle's story shows us that the coldest revenge is the one served with facts and signatures. If you were inspired by her intelligence and courage, please leave a like so YouTube can share the story with more people. And, of course, if you're not yet part of our community, subscribe now so you don't miss any stories. It's amazing how narratives like this can connect people from all over. So we can get an idea of how far our stories are reaching. Please comment below what city, state, or country you're watching from right now. We would love to see our community on the map. Take care, and until the next story.